Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Do Life podcast, where we talk about life, its challenges, and some clever ways to tackle some common obstacles with cutting edge technology, scientific based research, and a splash of metaphysical properties. I'm your host, Life Coach Layla, and today I have a special guest. She is a certified yoga instructor and a certified life coach, and also an expert in the divine feminine. Her name is Kelly Gardner, and I would love to welcome you to the show today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It is such a pleasure. I have been looking forward to this.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you on here. As most of people know that I'm a dark feminine expert. So there's a lot of overlap in what we do and what we talk about. And I'm really excited to hear how I want to hear your journey. I want to hear how you started with this and what inspired you to take this journey in the divine feminine and to teach others and to teach others about it as well.
You know, it's interesting. I feel like my journey just kind of happened. It wasn't something that I was necessarily looking for. And I think those are the signposts that this is your path when it appears and there's just no question that this is for you. I am a former mental health therapist. So I've worked in the realm of transformation and mindset for a long time. As you mentioned, I'm a yoga teacher, I'm a yoga therapist. And so I've also worked in the realm of embodiment and embodied healing. And a few years ago, I would say maybe 3 years ago, I was leading retreats with a friend of mine, and we had been doing the same old thing. And I was really looking for something more inspired. And I was also in the process of creating my own coursework instead of using everyone else's. And it was just this random email happened to come into my inbox talking about an archetype. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And it just kind of opened this door. The floodgates opened. All this information came in from random places. The universe was like, you need this. Open this email, go. And it just kind of took off from there. So
I love that. When we first met, you'd mentioned the archetypes, and I was so inspired by that because I'm also building the course on the dark feminine, and I love the idea of using the archetypes to help explain that. So I did adopt that. So I appreciate you. Thank you for sharing that with me.
absolutely.
So
We're here to share.
what exactly was it? I mean, you said, you got all these downloads from the universe and all the divine synchronicities and everything just kind of falls into place. What is it that inspires you about the divine feminine?
I think in some ways I resisted the divine feminine for a long time. Our culture is so kind of out of balance toward the masculine. And like many people in our culture, I really embraced this masculine idea of success and do more, work harder, work longer, push yourself, force. And in leaving the clinical realm, I was also in the process of healing from burnout. And so I was starting to recognize that way wasn't working for me. It wasn't working for my mind, my spirit, my body. I mean, I was having to heal all of those things. And a teacher that I had been working with just a few times started to mention the divine feminine. And so there's these little seeds being planted. And I think when the world of archetypes opened up to me and I really started looking at like the classical archetypes in storytelling, it provided this meaningful framework for me to draw in all of the different facets of my work to allow me to create my offering in a way that feels helpful in this realm of out of balance toward the masculine.
That's so beautifully worded. It's funny how similar our paths are. My reasoning for embracing the dark feminine was very, very similar. It's the part of us that society teaches us to suppress in order to be submissive. And so I love that we have the same background. I came from the hustle culture, and it was, success comes with the work and effort you put into it, and that's not real. So let's take it back a little bit for some of the listeners who may not even be aware. What exactly is the dark feminine? Can you explain a little bit, or the divine feminine? Can you explain a little bit about that to me?
If I'm going to speak from the realm of yoga philosophy and its sister science, Ayurveda, and the theory of really how we can work toward balance in our world, our universe, our mind body system, we live in a dualistic universe. We live in a universe made up of opposites. And within our mind body system, we have every opposite within us. We have everything within us. We're made of universal energy, just like everything else that exists. And that means we hold the potential for all of it. We hold the potential to be really kind, and we hold the potential to be mean. We hold the potential to feel cold and to feel warm. And so any opposite pairing you can think of is within us. So I love that the dark feminine is your realm, because that's kind of the how I teach it would be the shadow side of the divine, right? And we have both within us, and all of it serves a purpose. So really, I think in that way, all of it's divine because it's all within us. But as humans, we tend to label things as good or bad, as right or wrong, as light or dark. And so, in some ways, the divine is just one perspective of how to see parts of yourself, just like the dark would be a perspective of seeing parts of yourself. So, what would you add to that explanation?
So I love that you started out by talking about the duality of everything, because I believe that is in its essence the core of the divine feminine. You have the light feminine and the dark feminine, and when you have those two, well, you don't necessarily have to have them in balance or harmonious. You just have them within you, whether you like it or not. And the divine feminine is both of those. So the connection between the two of them and how they dance together and how they play together. I do, the divine is basically the duality of both of it. So I think your explanation was dead on and perfect. So thank you.
Yeah, I love that you use the words dance and play. I think that those light-hearted movement type descriptors are also so appropriate for the divine feminine. If we're looking at the masculine side of things, of course, there's the divine masculine and the dark masculine as well. And within us all, regardless of anything within us, we all have the masculine and the feminine, as you know. But as we're looking at masculine traits or characteristics, in a lot of ways, they create the structure. They create the routine. They create the holding place almost. They hold the structure for the feminine to flow, to play, to dance within. And so I love that you use those words. Beautiful.
I do. I agree. I think the masculine, I always see masculine as like a box. It's sharp, it's rigid, it has edges, it's very definitive. And a feminine is a circle, and it flows and it plays, so I try to incorporate the verbiage whenever applicable, because it's just, we need to dance and play and feel our feelings in not a judgmental way, but more of an understanding and a like hold space for that. And I think that's a lot of the shadow work coming through. But
yeah, absolutely. I actually teach the shadow side of things as well. And so I love this conversation and hearing your perspective, and you're right. We have so much in common in our work, but also in our perspective of all of this. This is fun. So thanks for inviting me.
yeah, no, I'm so happy to have you, because like I said, the dark feminine is an aspect of the divine feminine. So there's going to be a lot of overlap. So I would imagine quite a bit about both the light and the dark. Maybe talk a little bit about the differences between the light feminine and dark feminine, if you don't mind.
Yeah. I think as we continue with this idea of opposites or the duality within us, and we're speaking to light and dark, sometimes that can feel very woo woo. And so a lot of times I kind of giggle at that because we all have all of it within us. And a lot of our programming, our cultural conditioning, sets us up to see the woo woo, the energetic side, the feminine side as weak or not as valuable as the masculine. And that kind of speaks to that imbalance toward the masculine in our culture. And we're surrounded by it, we're immersed in it all the time. And so that perspective infiltrates our thoughts and how we show up every day. And so often I'll speak about the two as our strengths and our shadows. Not that the shadow doesn't have strengths, everything has its purpose, but just in a very accessible way to think about, okay, what can I lean into that may be a strength? Versus what myths have I been programmed to believe about myself? And so I teach the shadow, I teach about the shadow and the subconscious mind, but I really teach it through this lens of cultural myths that especially women are programmed to believe about themselves and the world and how to show up in it. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, no, I think it covered the aspect of, the light and the dark a little bit. The one thing I would maybe add to that, because I do talk about the light a little bit differently than, the dark, obviously. And I do address it from the masculine standpoint. It is off balance. I wanted to focus more on the dark feminine because culturally that's the part of us that we've been taught to suppress. Our intuition, our sexuality, our boundaries, our strength and our shadows, obviously. And the light is more commonly, I guess I would say, acceptable societally. It's the part of us that's soft, that's submissive, that's playful and nurturing. And those are the parts of us that, I agree, are stronger because we have been indoctrined to lean heavily towards those. And I see nothing wrong with having those are amazing parts of us that we should absolutely embrace. But my reasoning for focusing on the dark is I want to talk more about the parts of us that we've hidden. And that's why they're not as strong. It's not that they're not strong on themselves, but they're not strong within a lot of us because we haven't learned to embrace them and embody them and feel them and even acknowledge they exist sometimes. So I do think you answered the difference between the light and the dark and why we've suppressed so much of it. So yeah.
I love your perspective. And I'm kind of giggling to myself because as you were listing things like pleasure and desire, sexuality, boundaries, those are the strengths that I teach. So you and I, it sounds like, teach the same things just under the opposite labels. Because then I also pull in, I teach about grief and how we're all carrying grief and holding grief. Again, back to cultural programming, but all the ways that we may be taught, like you were saying, to people please, to overgive, to overschedule and think productivity and perfectionism are the way to go. And so those programming sides I call the dark, and what you're calling the dark feminine are what I teach as the strengths. So yes, I agree with all of it, just a different label.
Well, I assumed, like I said, we should have a lot of overlaps because in the divine, you're embracing all of the parts of the dark. You just categorize them a little differently, which is fine too. What I'm
I love
curious.
that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I was just going to say, I really love your perspective of it's been in the dark. We've been programmed to put these parts of ourselves into the shadow, into the dark. So yeah, I love this perspective of using the dark that.
Yeah. Um, I was going to ask, what was it that inspired you to want to teach this to other people?
I think that, like I said, when this idea of archetypes presented itself to me as a structure I could teach through, it made so much sense. And in a lot of ways, without using archetypal labels or that kind of structure, through embodied work in coaching and yoga therapy, yoga teaching that I was already doing, I was teaching a lot of step into the version of yourself
Mm.
that would have that strength, or the version of yourself that, would feel confident in this moment, or whatever it was. And so it really was just this presentation of, oh, here are the words you can use to describe work that you're already doing. And I think that's why it happened so quickly. I was able to put everything together that I was trying to figure out how to teach through this lens. So I think that's what inspired me.
Yeah, like you had a puzzle, a pile of puzzle pieces, and you didn't know that they all belonged to the same puzzle until a couple of them connected, and next thing you know, you have a beautiful picture. I love that. I love how
That's a
that just
great description.
yeah, it sounds like that's exactly how that kinda worked out for you, so that's so beautiful. If you could talk about your favorite part of the divine feminine, I know this is probably a really loaded question to narrow it down to your favorite, but what do you think is like the most impactful or powerful aspect of it that you would want to share to someone who knows nothing about it if you could only tell them one thing?
My answer may be different on different days, but I think right now, the most powerful piece in my life, and I think the most powerful piece for a lot of the women that I work with, and for many people in our world right now, in our culture at least, is intuition, and how living in a logic based culture that has valued logic and reason over intuition and what our body and our inner wisdom has to tell us, how that has really led to a lot of self-doubt, a lot of seeking wisdom outside of ourselves. And so I think, just getting a taste of, my body told me this and I went with it and it was right for me, that can be so powerful and really open this gate of tapping into our own power, our own wisdom, our ability to be the expert on ourselves and our own lives, and to really create an experience of our lives that we not only like, but that we love. So, intuition is the short answer.
I love it. Yeah, that's definitely one of my topics too because again, it is something I feel has been suppressed and we are taught to look outside of ourselves when we all have the answers. The intuition comes as the tiny little whispers and the urges to do things that make zero sense whatsoever. But and we talk ourselves out of it. We think about it, we analyze it, we pretend we didn't hear it. And when things don't happen the way we wanted them to, or we're met with resistance or struggle or frustration, in the back of our heads, we're like, we knew better. We know we knew better, even though we chose not to listen. To learn how to embrace the intuition, I think is super, super important. What what do you think would be a good way, since we all have the light and dark in ourselves, what is a good way to embody the divine feminine on a daily or regular basis? Like what kind
Mhm.
of advice would you give?
As a yoga therapist, I would say probably the most powerful piece there is tuning into our bodies. And from this logical, you know, valuing reason standpoint that our culture lives in, many of us, especially if we've experienced traumas related to our bodies, may have really cut ourselves off from what our bodies are telling us. And so I think the first piece is not like, okay, get really still and just be in your body. If that feels too overwhelming, like start with, can you feel your breath? Or pinpoint one area in the body. If I just rub my fingertips against my thumbs, can I feel my fingerprints? And really just kind of starting to tune in these small ways within the body to reconnect, to befriend the body, and to open that conversation, I think.
I love that. That's beautiful. Yeah, I talk about the fingertips and the ridges in nervous system resets when you're hyper focusing on a specific sense, like one of your senses. Like look at your microphone and look at all the ridges in it. So you're calming yourself and your body. So being in tune with your body is super, super important. So you mentioned the archetypes a couple times now. Can you tell me a little bit about them?
Sure. So there are a multitude of archetypes, and we're familiar with many of them because they're in every story, in every culture, in every belief system all over the world. I teach seven classical feminine archetypes. And honestly, I take this view of these seven archetypes as representations of different parts of ourselves. And I've also linked that to the seven main energy centers in the body. So one archetype per chakra, and then we can really tune into uh, strengths, characteristics that would represent that area within us and that archetype. So the seven archetypes that I teach are the maiden, the mother, the mystic, the sage, the lover, the queen, and the huntress. So you'll have different names that come up. I use sage. Some people will use crone. Some people use wise woman. So different archetypes, like anything else, will have different names depending on, who's teaching.
I use the mystic.
But those are the yeah, yeah. But those are the seven that I teach through, I would say.
How do you teach them? How do you incorporate those into your
Mhm.
teaching? So you said you incorporate each one with a body, with a
Mhm.
chakra. How
How does that work?
yeah.
So I have a 16-week group coaching program online for women, and we have an intro week and an outro week. And in between that, we go through the seven archetypes once, and then we go through the seven archetypes again. And so in any given week, we're focusing on one specific archetype. We're focusing on character strengths that we all have within us that I've associated with that archetype. We're looking at the energy center of the body associated and the characteristics that show up there in the strength or the shadow. We discuss a cultural myth that may show up in our programming and kind of work against us in that realm. And so we have all of this that we're working with, and then I also create a themed yoga practice to embody what we're learning and a meditation for the week. So there's some talking, learning, and then there's some embodying as we go through.
I love that. And how often do you do these classes?
We go through the entire 16-week program twice a year. So I have a round launching in February, actually. And then typically at the very end of the summer, we'll do the fall round. So right now it's November now as we're speaking in 2025. We are into the second round of the archetypes right now.
And so your next classes will start February 2026.
Right. Correct. Yeah.
And for someone who wants to go deeper with you and learn more about it or maybe sign up with the class, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, please find me. I am on social media, but my email address and my website is yourradiantsoul.com. My email is Kelly Gardner at yourradiantsoul.com. And then I'm on Instagram as Your Radiant Soul Kelly. I'm on Facebook, Kelly Holloman Gardner. Place. I'm on TikTok. Yeah.
I will make sure I will leave links to all of your
Yeah.
socials in the show notes so
Thank you.
people
Yeah.
can just click on them if they'd like. Is there anything that you wanted to cover or mention or talk about that we didn't get to in today's episode? Something that you really wanted to kind of drive across as far as a message or anything along those lines?
I think really recognizing that we all have everything within us, which I mentioned, but just coming back to that idea so that if we can start to work on accepting all of ourselves, we can find that place of moving between the light and the dark. We can find more flow between the opposites within us. As long as we're denying any parts of ourselves, hating any parts of ourselves, hiding any parts of ourselves, that's going to get in the way of that flow and ease. And those hidden parts are just going to keep speaking up for our attention. And so just recognizing that there's nothing wrong. Nothing has gone wrong. There's nothing wrong with you. You have all of it's just how human of you. You have all of this within you. And And I think beginning to embrace it is a great place to start.
Amazing, amazing. I love that the divine feminine is basically just embodying and embracing every aspect of yourself, both the light and the dark, not keeping them separated, but learning how to integrate them fully and wholly inside of you. And I think that's a beautiful way to end this session. Kelly, I feel like I could talk to you all day about all of these things. We could go back and forth and pick our brains and end up in a partnership if we kept going.
Yeah, let's go.
I'm actually not opposed to that, so that's a new idea. But I want to just say thank you so much for being here and for sharing all this information with me and my listeners. This has been so powerful and impactful, and I hope everybody found value. Like, share, subscribe, do all the things. I love you, and I thank you guys for being here, and you as well, Kelly. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It has been such a pleasure.
Let's go do life divinely. Bye.
Absolutely.